This message is brought to you by donotage.org, the longevity research organisation that's on a mission to extend health span for as many people as possible via products that actually work. Start your journey today at donotage.org and use code LLAMA for a 10% discount. That's LLAMA.
There's something there that made me want to put together nutrients that are fresh, that are beneficial. Omega-3s were very crucial for me to manage to deliver because I've taken cod liver oil all my life and I know that fish oil is so good for you.
Janne Sande is an entrepreneur and the inventor of a new recovery drink for athletes. What could the science behind it also tell us about living a long, healthy life? Hello again, welcome to the Live Long and Master Aging podcast. I'm Peter Bowes. This is where we explore the science and stories behind human longevity.
This episode is brought to you in association with EO3, a ready-to-drink product made with fish oil and protein, designed to help athletes train faster and harder with optimum recovery. Backed by science, EO3 is a complete nutritional solution for cognitive and physical benefits. A better way to get the omega-3 your body needs.
It is perhaps one of the oldest nutritional rules of healthy living. Make sure you're getting your daily dose of fish oil. Well, the science behind and our understanding of omega-3 oils has come a long way. And in today's episode, we're going to explore how something called nano-dispersion technology could be something of a game changer when it comes to fueling our bodies. Janne Sande, welcome to the Live Long and Master Aging podcast.
Thank you very much.
And you are talking to us, if I'm correct, from the beautiful city of Oslo in Norway?
Absolutely, I am, yes.
Really good to have you. We're also joined by Professor Stuart Phillips, Director of the Physical Activity Centre of Excellence, PACE, at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, in Canada. Stuart is an old friend of the podcast. We've talked previously about the importance of maintaining physical strength as we age. Stuart, welcome back.
Very pleased to be on the show, Peter. Thanks for having me back on.
It's a great pleasure. And Stuart, you're going to help us dig into the science relating to omega-3. There's a lot to digest there, no pun intended.
Yeah.
But Janne, let's start with you. I mentioned that you invented EO3, Enhanced Omega-3. Can we step back and explain your area of expertise, your career to date, and what led you to this?
Yes, I'd like to. I've always been interested in nutrition and health. My education is in journalism and business, so, very different from what I'm actually doing right now or what I have been doing for the last 20 years.
And a little personal aside there, I understand you mentioned you trained as a journalist. You actually trained in my hometown where I was brought up as a child, which is quite a coincidence.
Small little Darlington, yes.
In England.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'm from the west coast of Norway, eventually, a beautiful place, a fjord up in the west coast. When I grew up, I was used to eating fresh fish. My older relatives, they really used the nature to find the food, the berries, the herbs. We had homegrown vegetables. So early on, I saw what nature could bring of fresh food. And my older relatives, they got very old and they were very active and they were smiling. So I think there's something there that also made me want to put together nutrients that are fresh, that are beneficial, and see if I could come up with a good formulation of nutrients. And omega-3s were very crucial for me to manage to deliver because I've taken cod liver oil all my life and I know that fish oil is so good for you.
Well, that's what I want to delve into in a moment with Stuart. We've all heard since we were children that fish oil is good for you, but maybe perhaps not fully understand the ingredients that go into it. Just one other question for you. How does a journalist who clearly has a passion for this and an interest in this move into what is essentially a scientific realm? I assume it's all about the collaborations and people that you're working with.
Yeah, well, when I have 3 kids and when they were small, I wanted them to take omega-3s as well. Cod liver oil is not pleasant. They didn't want it. And I think a lot of kids don't want it. And then, I wanted to build a business. I wanted to do something in nutrition. And I wanted actually to have then an omega-3 formulation for kids. And I knew then it would have to taste better. So I started to work on the emulsion format. I learned and failed and tried again, to see how I could stabilize these fatty acids, these very unstable fatty acids. And eventually I read a lot and I talked to people who knows a lot. So eventually I managed to find a way to stabilize the fish oil in emulsions, and then gradually made it more into a liquid form, because a good tasting drink is something that is very attractive to kids, but not only kids, I think to everybody, if you make it taste nice. Eventually it was the taste that was the main target, but then I also, through doing a lot of experiments, working with scientists and reading, I understood also that there's actually more than just a taste benefit of keeping these fatty acids stable and fresh. It's also about the health benefits that are preserved. And when you also combine these then stable fatty acids with other nutrients, like, for example, protein, and have a rich source of antioxidants and phytochemicals from plants, then you actually create a very, very healthy food. You don't just deliver a single nutrient, you deliver a complex superfood.
Yeah, you've covered a lot of fascinating ground there. So, Stuart, let me bring you in now to join some of the dots and fill in some of the gaps. But maybe first of all, just remind us about the work that you do with PACE and what brought you to this point, and especially your interest in this subject.
Yeah, it's interesting, actually. I think Janne and I have known each other now for maybe 12 or 14 years, and the circumstances of our, getting to meet each other were that I was looking at designing or thought, these are some ingredients that we've seen separately have independent effects on people's muscle. And all the way back to the first time you and I spoke, my mission in PACE and a lot of the research that we do is about helping people age as effectively as they can. And we think that muscle strength and muscle mass are a key part of that, and the ability to maintain mobility as we go into later age. And, there's probably a handful of ingredients that you could put together to say, this works, and this works. And I think, to put some light onto it, it would be that, having been trained as a biochemist, they all work through different pathways. And I think that that's an interesting point, because it means that neither is really redundant with the other. And I thought, it'd be great if we had a drink or something that could do this and could have this and could have this. And I did some searching around, and lo and behold, Janne actually had made the drink I was pretty much thinking would be a good combination. And I thought, this is great, but this stuff, there's no way that it can taste good, because I'm sure probably lots of people have tried some of the early days of omega-3 fatty acid capsules and the fish odor and smell, and then the if you happen to burp afterwards, how that tastes.
Yep.
And yet here, so Janne said, well, listen, I'll send you some drink. And so I kind of readied myself when I first tasted it. And I tasted it and I said, what is that? This is too good to be true, So, and that was the start of it. And it's been some time since that we've sort of tried to bring it all back together. But EO3 is the culmination of a lot of Janne's hard work and the science that initially, I'll admit, I thought this would be a good idea, but that Janne had already scooped me on. So I think it's a pretty cool product, and I'll vouch for the taste. It's tasty for sure.
Oh, that's good to hear. So let's go back to basics then and talk about initially why omega-3 fatty acids or omega-3 oils are important to us. Why do we need them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the important point to realize, and we may have touched on this in the last time we chatted, is to say that carbohydrates and fats, when we ingest them, they're fuel for the most part. But some fats that we ingest, and particularly these omega-3 or long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids, are actually what we refer to as essential fats. We need to have them in our diet because we don't have the ability to make them ourselves. Having said that, the estimates are that we need a very small amount of these oils. But I think what we're talking about here with this drink is to go beyond just what's essential in a minimal dose into what we believe are more optimal dose ranges. And so these lipids form integral parts of membranes in our cells, particularly in neural cells, our brain, nerve cells, and interestingly enough, in muscle cells as well. And they probably have functions beyond which we're completely aware. But one place where they do have an interesting function is actually changing the membrane of mitochondria in our cells. And, the links to mitochondrial function and aging and all kinds of debilitative diseases are obviously many. And these long-chain fatty acids are able to enhance mitochondrial function. And I'll have to admit that was something that was surprising to me, but we had backed that up with research that was actually independent of our association with Janne and her team.
And we need to, or it's suggested that we perhaps should be supplementing because we don't eat perfect diets, that we, and especially athletes, which I know are a large part of your target audience with this product, but we don't eat perfect diets. We don't necessarily get everything that we need from whether it's meat or vegetables or fruits that we eat.
Well, I think it would be an understatement to say we don't eat perfect diets for the average person, for sure. But, I think that's part of it. A lot of people obviously don't eat. The recommendations in Canada and the United States and in Norway, it's a non-issue because the Norwegians eat so much fish. It's not really a big deal, but are to, substitute out some of the meat that we would otherwise eat, and particularly red meat, and replace it with fish. And people just don't do that to the extent that they probably should. Now, the Scandinavians in general, but the Norwegians in particular are, voracious consumers of fish. And I don't think it's an issue there, but the doses of fish that we're talking about with the omega-3s and EO3, for example, would even challenge most Norwegians to get that amount of fish in a given day. So it's an enhanced, definitely, version of omega-3s, and it's certainly something that most North Americans, anyway, would struggle greatly to get with respect to diet. So it's skipping a lot of steps with the biochemistry and giving you the end product from the fish itself, which is it's difficult, if not impossible, to get usually.
And of course, you work with athletes of all ages. Was it that a correct assumption of mine that perhaps athletes more than your everyday person need this kind of supplementation?
Well, again, people like to think that athletes are somewhat special. Of course, they are. But they're like the rest of us. They're pressed for time. In fact, maybe more pressed for time given some of their training schedules. So, yeah, they don't even come close in terms of meeting the types of omega-3 intakes that we're talking about here. So, yeah, they would probably benefit from the intakes of omega-3 fatty acids from a muscle standpoint, a regeneration and recovery standpoint, but maybe from other standpoints as well that we're not even realizing. And it could be something to do with inflammation as well, for example. Most people are pretty familiar with the omega-3 link in cardiovascular disease. I don't think for athletes that's as big an issue. But there are benefits to these fatty acids that are, more than just the cardiovascular health benefits that we're familiar with.
It's been really wonderful to see that athletes and, professional athletes, professional teams wants to use the drink for their muscle recovery. But, older people or people in their middle ages or going into their older years, you really have to prevent things from happening. You have to prevent sarcopenia. You have to prevent cognitive decline. You really have to take care of your cell health so that the cells can function as well as possible, get rid of the waste, all the signaling they have to do. And then omega-3 fatty acids are so important. Also the proteins, the combination of omega-3 and proteins for the muscles. And also, I believe, the phytochemicals in there, for example, thymocanin from black cumin oil, the carnitine, things that are in there for a reason and very much to help with processes like chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, things that we know very easily becomes a part of growing older.
Stuart mentioned when you first tasted this drink, your first thought was this is too good to be true based on past experience with fish oil. So, Janne, In terms of the formulation, what have you done? What is so special that you've managed to get around that and make it more palatable?
Well, it took a long time, for sure, and a lot of trials to see how I could do it. But I never wanted to put anything in there which would compromise on health. So I don't add any sugar. I don't add any sweeteners or preservatives. It's very much a food of natural components. And the nutrients are there to protect each other, but also to enhance each other's, to create synergy. And I guess I've been lucky too, because I'm not a scientist, but it's a lot of work. Yeah.
Clearly, this isn't just you, is it? You have a collaborative team of people who are well versed in the science.
Yes, absolutely. I worked with very clever people in food technology and read obviously a lot. And then also I have had very nice collaborations with, for example, Stuart, who has done so much research on omega-3s and proteins. And that inspired me, of course, also when it comes to what I wanted to put in there.
I wanted to delve into, I mentioned nano-dispersion technology up at the beginning. In terms of exactly what that is and how this drink and ultimately its effects benefit from it. Maybe, Stuart, you could take that one.
Yeah, I think that there's a number of hurdles to overcome. That Janne's drink has really been pretty revolutionary in this area. So first, it's the combination. As Janne mentioned, it's not just omega-3 fatty acids, but it delivers a substantial payload of those fatty acids. It has protein in there, which is, again, another fuel that you and I have spoken about as being a key part of muscle regeneration and recovery. The nano-dispersion is really a technology that allows a really efficient uptake of these omega-3 fatty acids. And that's to contrast it with, and a lot of people will say, why don't I just take a fish oil pill with a pill, for example? We do know that the dispersion of these lipids into these very small droplets results in a much more efficient uptake and much more efficient than just pills alone. And it's sort of recapitulating, if you want to think about it in this way, the food matrix. And one of the things that we do know is that the food matrix has interactions and promotes uptake generally more efficiently than a form of the food in isolation, which would be the pills. And so it's a ready to drink. It is tasty. I compare and contrast it to medical foods in the space that were very high in omega-3 fatty acids, designed for patient populations, and without being unkind, it really had a poor taste profile. And, that was probably the reason why they were called medical food. But this is something that would give the same dose of these fatty acids, if not more, and is enhanced in its efficiency to promote muscle recovery because of other ingredients that are in there. So the protein is one. Janne can list lots of others for you, but it's also suspended inside, a natural polyphenolic matrix. And these polyphenols come from the fruits that are part of the extract that is added to the drink. And, I don't think I can stress it enough is to say that one thing that we know happens with fish oil pills is that the omega-3s become oxidized. And oxidized omega-3 fatty acids may actually be deleterious for your health, and everything in the EO3 formulation is maintained in a reduced state. And that's just a natural fact of the nano-dispersion technology in combination with the fruit juices and their natural ability to be able to maintain things in a reduced state. And, all of that, because those were all questions I had for Janne when we first started. I said, what about this? She says, we've tested that. What about that? We've tested that. And I was like, it's impressive. So full credit to Janne and her teams and her persistence. And what she's not telling you, there's 3 kids in the background there that probably ate various formulations of the drink somewhere along the way and said, this one is terrible, Mom. Try another one.
I think that's actually one of the reasons I couldn't stop, because they pushed me. They were telling me when they didn't like it, so I had to go on.
Well, it's always good to have readily available trial subjects, I suppose they were.
Yeah.
You've both mentioned the combination here with protein. I assume this is whey protein, this is animal protein. A lot of people listening to this might be wondering if there is a plant-based protein formulation that would work as well.
Yes, it would work, but at the moment we have whey protein. It's a combination of, well, there's mainly whey protein. There's also some collagen. I know that there's very good health benefits of whey protein, so I like to use that. But maybe further down the road, we might also have a version with the plant protein for sure. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on or even preferences in terms of the source of protein?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things when I first spoke to Janne with the idea that this would be used in older individuals, and, rewind to the podcast previously when you and I spoke, is to talk about the importance of the amino acid leucine. So, just to remind your listeners that it's really leucine is sort of the key component of all of the 20 components that make up protein, 20 amino acids, that it's like the brick that goes into the wall that starts the whole process. And so the abundance of that amino acid is highest in whey protein. So it makes sense to use whey protein in this context. And as a result, it lets you use less protein, to be honest with you, to trigger the full, what we call muscle anabolic response. And I think that that's pretty important for athletes and particularly older people in terms of turning on their rate of muscle regeneration after something physical activity wise. So I think whey is a good choice. I think that the world of plant proteins now is changing really, really quickly. My own understanding even has meant that, there are some plant proteins that 10 years ago I would have said I wouldn't bother, that now I think have been purified to the state and appear in forms that make them much more readily available. So it's definitely a consideration with Janne's formulation that it could be plant-based in the future for sure.
We've talked about the benefits. What are the symptoms of a deficiency of omega-3?
Yeah, well, the outward sign, if you're absolutely devoid of omega-3, there's all kinds of neurological symptoms that occur, or if you don't have the capacity to make them, or if you don't have some of these fatty acids around, if during infancy and particularly, then there are symptoms to do with cognitive function later in life. I don't know that anybody would experience any sort of true deficiency symptoms. But I do think that what we're talking about here is an augmentation of function when you do get these things in the doses that we're talking about in the drinks that are available. So one of the things that, again, speaking anecdotally to athletes is that, they feel that they're getting a benefit from it. What that means, I don't know. One of the things that we do know from research is that they experience lower levels of muscle soreness the next day after a pretty intense workout. And Janne's got those types of data from previous work with some collaborators of mine. And that would probably be the outward manifestation that most athletes would be able to point to say, yeah, there's something different about this, and it's the soreness issue. And they report at least that they feel more ready or able to play or engage in some type of practice. Tough to quantify that, I'll admit, but it is out there in a couple of published papers.
Janne, is the data, can you tell us about the data that supports this?
Yes, well, I was involved in a study with Stirling, University of Stirling, some years ago. And they did a study where they compared formulation of the drink to just having protein or just having carbohydrates. And it was clearly the combination of omega-3, protein and carbohydrates that made them perform best and also have less muscle soreness. But I also wanted to, on your question, Peter, about how do you notice if you have omega-3 deficiency? It's not easy to notice, but I think it's so crucial for your overall health to have a good ratio when omega-3, omega-6 ratio, that I think I would really encourage people to do a test to see how their ratio is. Because there's also now, there's so many published papers, of course, on omega-3s, but there was also a recent paper in Nature Communication showing that there's actually a strong correlation between omega-3 levels and overall, how do you say it, death, and of different causes. So it's actually linked to lifespan. And knowing that omega-3s are so important for the cells, like Stu mentioned, the cell membrane, which is so important for what is coming into the cells, how the cells manage to do their work. I think it's a good investment to find out how your levels are.
And we'll continue this conversation in just a moment.
Hey, quick question for you. Are you someone who wants to be fit, healthy, and happy? And what if I told you could get your dream body by simply just listening to a podcast? I'm Josh.
And I'm KG, and we're the hosts of the Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast.
Listen, we get it. Fitness isn't easy. Carbs, no carbs.
Just stop, okay? It doesn't have to be that complicated. And that's why we made this podcast. We get straight to the facts so you can become your best you.
So the way to check us out is click the link in the show notes or search Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast on any of the major podcast platforms. We'll see you soon.
Well, you mentioned lifespan, and Stuart and I have talked about health span, the main sort of aspiration of what I talk about on this podcast, those number of years that we live with optimum health in terms of enjoying life before hopefully quite a fast decline, ultimately to death, but to put off those chronic diseases for as long as possible. And clearly this is of interest for those people, hopefully everyone who aspires to that kind of ultimately a lifespan, but the health span that they can enjoy life.
For sure.
So who is using the product now, and what kind of feedback? We've talked extensively about athletes, but what about other communities, Janne, and what have they said to you?
Yes, well, the product has, for the last 2 years, it has mainly been used by athletes because we have had a soft launch, just targeting athletes and professional clubs, both in the US, but also in the UK. And luckily, I'm really glad that we've had a good feedback from them. But now we want to, because with getting the experience from these consumers or this group, we now want to broaden the scope and make the product available to everybody who wants to take care of their health and who wants to prevent illness and keep healthy. EO3 is now being launched just a couple of months ago to a broader audience in the US. So it's very new, actually, that we go for a broader audience.
And I'm just interested in its position in the marketplace. Is this a convenient drink? Is it a convenient, ready-to-consume product that you can simply grab and off you go? Is that how we think about it? Or do we think of it more as a supplementation in terms of the omega-3 and the fatty acids that we're getting that perhaps we're not getting in other aspects of our diet? I suppose, what is the incentive? What are we thinking when we grab this particular drink?
I hope that people see it as a daily nutritional drink that has the ability to help them keep healthy and prevent illness. But it's more than just a healthy drink. It has more properties than a healthy drink. But it's difficult to exactly say, because it is a food. It's not a pill, it's not a capsule, it's a food. But I like to think of it as a superfood, to be honest. Yeah.
And I suppose the thought behind that question, and Stu, maybe you can tackle this one, is that I talk a lot with different organizations and scientists about supplementation. And there's a lot of good work going on around the world with different aspects of supplementation that benefit us in different ways. And I think for everyday people, there's a certain amount of confusion, and there's also a decision that has to be made, perhaps on financial grounds, in terms of what do I do, where do I stop, and what do I need most? And for a lot of people, it's very difficult to make that decision, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, given the ingredients of the drink, I mean, it delivers about 20 grams of protein. It's high quality protein. It's got, 2.5 grams of fish oil, which is a tough dose to get by eating fish. It's got other ingredients that are fruit-based. I mean, that's what gives it, the good taste and the natural antioxidant status. So to me, it is a ready-to-drink. It's, it comes in a carton. It would take, if I were a consumer and I were taking fish oil pills, it's obviously, you could argue that it's a replacement for that. But on a value proposition basis, you would say, well, fish oil pills are much cheaper. And I would say, you're absolutely correct. But it's more than just fish oil pills. Are you taking a protein supplement? Well, yes, I am. And I'm like, well, now you've got the two in one, but you've got other ingredients as well that add to the effectiveness of the drink. Carnitine is in there. There's another compound which we think has important properties for fat metabolism. So I do think that it's something that reaches into different market segments. And I look at it more as a food rather than a supplement, even though it's an enhanced food. So, Janne is fond of saying superfood, and I think that that's an appropriate tag. It really is something that, is part of your breakfast, or for athletes, obviously, we always talk about post-exercise as a recovery agent because it's liquid, it's got some carbohydrate to restore muscle glycogen stores, and it's got the protein there. The omega-3s are, from an aging perspective, I can say that there's a positive and growing body of evidence to suggest that they are anti-sarcopenic as well. So they attenuate or mitigate muscle loss as we age. So, to me, it's something that you could incorporate as part of your normal diet. It could take the place of a juice at breakfast or a smoothie or something like that. And you wouldn't have to feel that you would need to take then probably 2 or 3 supplements that are part of the drink. So it ticks a lot of boxes. And I know I've said this before, but the unlock is clearly how good it tastes. So it's become part of my routine. Let's put it that way.
Interesting. And just for reasons of full disclosure, this is an episode that is sponsored by EO3. And I always think it is important to be transparent about things. Stuart, you say that the two of you have been friends for some time, but you're looking at this as an independent scientist, and your first thought was one of skepticism and you wanted to learn more?
I'm always a scientist trained to be skeptical. So I was always skeptical. And I think, you taste it at first and you're like, really? I will give Janne and her collaborators credit. They've invested a serious amount of product and money in the science that backs up the ingredients that are there. I think when you begin to piece together the other information that other individuals have from various different parts of the beverage, you begin to tell a story. I do sit on the scientific advisory board for EO3. I don't get any financial compensation for that. So you can say, yes, you have a vested interest. The vested interest I have in it is science. But I think, again, if you have a choice to make around money to spend on which supplements you were looking at in terms of the aging space, this is one that it's not the sort of specialized ingredient. It's normal dietary components, but in an enhanced fashion and combined together in one package. And, that for me reduces a lot of barriers. I like fish, but I don't like it so much that I could eat as much as I would have to eat to get the type of dose that EO3 has. That's for sure.
Interesting. And Janne, just broadening things out a little bit, and this is often, you could say, one of my favorite end of interview questions, and that is talking about your broader long-term approach to your own longevity. This is a podcast about human longevity, aspiring to live as long and as well as we can. And I think you touched on this in your first answer, and that led to your interest in this. But do you think about your own longevity and your own life and physical capabilities in the decades to come?
Absolutely. I'm so glad that we have the ability to help our own body and mind to have a better life. I mean, of course, you can only do so much, but still you can do quite a lot. And I'm so encouraged also by the science now, which is happening in the longevity space. So I'm going on. I really want to see if I can maybe include other things in the drink to do even more, but that will take time. But for now, I drink EO3 every day, of course. I exercise and have good friends. And I think all of those things will help me.
Well, I think you've actually just touched on in the final few seconds of your answer the 3 components that I talk about a lot, and that is having good friends, and it is your diet. And Stuart, I think you agree, clearly it's your exercise regime as well.
Well, exercise is the cornerstone. I'll not step away from that. But I think you're right. I mean, I think that aging and longevity and definitely health span is a function of the foods you eat, the activity that you do, and the friends or the causes you keep. So for sure.
Well, this has been really interesting. I'd like to thank you both. I'd like to, Janne, wish you all the best with your endeavours. I'm going to be fascinated to see how this develops. And you say you're moving into the US market more and more now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the US is our primary market, so absolutely.
Best of luck with it. Thank you both.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Good to talk to you. And if you'd like to find out more about EO3, the company website is drinkeo3.com. This episode of the podcast was produced in association with EO3. I'll put some more details into the show notes at our website, lamapodcast.com. That's LLAMA podcast.com. There's also a transcript of this conversation there. This has been a HealthSpan Media production. We'll be back very soon with another episode. Thank you so much for listening. Health optimization is what this podcast is all about, and that means taking care of our mitochondria, the energy centres of our cells. Physical strength, avoiding frailty is key, and that's why the science behind urolithin A and the work of Timeline Nutrition is so interesting. You can find out more and get a discount code at our website and in the show notes for this episode.